This is why I still do what I do for my patients. And I'm a pediatric nurse now. I take care of dying children. And many of her children would see the same thing over and over and over again and would talk about it. And it would be kind of like what we would describe as a gray, except they had very thin heads. So it was a year after the Phoenix Lights. I was working in Mesa at the time, and it flew right over my head by about 30 feet because I was on a hill. And I wasn't into UFOs at all. I couldn't care less about UFOs when that thing went over my head.
Chris Lehto. Welcome to Lehto Files. Okay, welcome back to Lehto Files. I'm Chris Lehto, and I'm here today with David Parker, and he has been a hospice nurse for children among adults for many years, and he has some incredible stories to share. So thank you, David, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Can you just go through your experience as a hospice nurse and then what you started seeing?
Well, I've been a nurse since now for 45 years. I'm 71 years old and I'm still a hospice nurse. It's just who I am. I retired for a bit and they kept calling me back, and it's like, I had to return. Um, Started out, I worked for Indian Health Services and I worked pediatrics and labor and delivery. Um, and later, I actually lost my own children in an accident. And that's when I switched from being a technical, hands on hospital nurse and kind of dedicated my life to being a hospice nurse and supporting people in absolutely the worst times of their life and also supporting the families. Um, Hospice started in Europe and kind of came to the United States back in the 1970s, 1980s. My first job, I worked in an AIDS inpatient unit here in Phoenix, Arizona. Um, Not only were people, dying of a horrible disease at the time, but also horrible emotional stigma that their families, the government, everyone just kind of turned their back on these patients and just neglected them. And we opened up an inpatient unit, an old nursing home, and we just took them in. People would just literally drop them off on the sidewalk and wouldn't even knock on the door and tell us that they were, abandoning these patients. And we would open the door and just see them laying there. We just carried them in and took care of them. So that began my hospice career, and I had so many wonderful experiences. And along with caring for the patients and taking care of them, it is the crisis that their families and that the loved ones are going through also. I took care of adults. Our AIDS patients, we had 35 beds. Finally, it closed due to funding. And then I worked in multiple 10-bed inpatient units in hospice. Most were for adults only. And um, it was a constant, like a revolving door. As soon as someone would die, and we'd have the mortuary come and make the removal, and we'd clean the bed. There was like a waiting list for another to come through. So we would have 10 dying patients, and very often we would have at least 3 deaths a shift, 12-hour shift. So in my hospice career, I kept notes. So I remember all these people. I've been bedside for 3,600 deaths um, so far in my hospice career.
It seems like you get a lot of meaning from it, and it helped you, I guess, deal with the loss of your children.
With- I've done a couple interviews on that. That was an amazing experience, and um, not only did I lose my children, I had an incredible blessing, about a year later, they showed up. They came back and gave me a wake up call because it's different when you watch, when you help and support others through the grief that they're going through. Uh, And with all of the experience that I've had with death, I buried myself with my children emotionally. And you would think that I would have understood death and dying a little better, going through my own experience. But I needed a little support and help too. And I had a wonderful experience with actually seeing their soul and getting a wonderful, warm message from them just for a few moments. Just a release that they're doing fine and doing well. And I hear that so much from my patients that do kind of come back and touch in with me and thank me for all the help that we've done in hospice. And that just released me. Everything's fine, everything's unfolding exactly as it needs to. And it kind of turned that um, uh, anchor that I had of guilt and loss and just turned it into stepping stones. And I was able to move forward and get back into helping others. So, sometimes when we go through a catastrophe, we go through a trauma, we just freeze up. And when you freeze up, it's just like a scab on a wound. It's ugly and it's sore and it hurts, but it's there for a purpose. And a scab goes over a wound because a wound heals from the inside out. And eventually, when that wound heals, the scab's no longer needed and it falls off. And then you got nice, pink, tender, healthy skin and it heals and it's done and you move on. And that's kind of what grief is about. Sometimes you just got to let grief just kind of just give it time and let it heal itself. That's what we all need to go through. Just give it time. Don't push it. It's okay.
Yeah, I think it's just a part of the human condition, right? Part of whatever this experience is that we're going through. Everyone is going to deal with birth and everyone is going to deal with death. It seems like in the Western world, at least in my experience, we don't talk about death. We don't think about it. At least in my family, we never really planned for it or talked about it. But I lost my father this year, to cancer. And it was very difficult. I miss him every day. But going investigating this UAPs has really completely changed my perspective on life and death. And I really am confident now that, like you said, he's still around and he's doing fine. Wherever he is, and like you said, it's just a natural process. It's just part of whatever this experience is.
I have this one patient, I don't know why, she kind of chose to give me this incredible experience. Um, I came into work and she was already in a coma and totally non responsive. And there was just a feeling about her. I just kind of felt like kinship. And I looked up her name. I'd never seen her before. And I took care of her and changed her. And, we gave her medicine. And I was taking care of her and went on to the next patient. And when I happened to be going down the hallway to take care of somebody, I just, peep in and look at each patient, make sure they're okay. And I walked by her room and she's sitting up. This woman looked like, probably in her 70s, maybe 80 years old. And she's looking great. Her hair's looking good. She's smiling. The side rails were down. Her legs are on the floor. And I'm looking at her and, wow, well, you're looking good. Everybody else is looking bad. You're looking good. And then I walk on down the hallway and I'm thinking, well, she's in a coma. What's she doing sitting on the side of the bed? So I walk back and I look at her and she's back in bed in a coma, the side rolls up. And I'm thinking, what did I just see? And it was odd because I had just taken care of her. She only had one leg. And when I had just seen her seconds ago, she's sitting on the side of the bed with two legs. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I just saw her soul. She just showed me her soul. And I went up to the bed and I just spoke to her laying there. She's not responsive. I just said, thank you. thank you for showing me your soul. What a blessing you gave me. I'm your nurse, you're the patient, but you just gave me a blessing. You just gave me a gift. I just like, oh my God, what a wonderful thing you did for me. It's like, this is why I'm still a nurse. This this is why I still do what I do for my patients. And I'm a pediatric nurse now. I take care of dying children. And like one of my most recent children, I took care of, she's 8 days old, and her mother's 14 years old. So I'm taking care of an infant, and her mother's a child. Eh, So I'm taking care of both of them. And she has no husband. And I mean, her family's just useless. And, we got CPS involved and all that. So I'm taking care of an infant to two children. And it's just like, oh my God, you know, uh, I open myself up to the universe. What can I do for these people? The day before I even meet them, I just open up my soul. What can I do to help these people? And I always get an answer. I always get an answer. And it's just, I just follow that energy. And it's just, it's just, I am so fortunate to get to be a hospice nurse. Oh, but I know you don't want to hear about this. You want to hear about.
No, no, I think we're all fortunate. I think society's fortunate to have you there, David. You know, if you consider how difficult a job this is. And I think we talked before and you said that, most people don't want to do the job. They don't want to be the hospice nurse. It's too difficult. And yet you keep coming out of retirement. Like I'm pretty sure at 71, you probably don't have to keep dealing with this.
I tell you something else that just happened. Um, and again, I open myself up as what, we go to school and we become RNs, registered nurses. They train us to do certain things. They train us which end of the needle's pointy. They teach us how not to kill patients. I mean, basically, when you graduate nursing school, you learn how not to kill people, and then they let you go. And it takes years how to become a real nurse. And um, uh, and over years, you develop this sixth sense on how to really care and diagnose, and you get to feel, how to take care of people. And I took this class called Silva Mind Control. It's now called the Silva Method. And it's how to like lower your brainwave activities, how to relax, and how to tune in and get information uh, from a subjective level. And I kind of use a meditation before I meet my patients, and I just kind of feel and and touch him. What can I do best for to take care of my patients before I meet them? And this one, it was a couple, and the baby was 8 days old, and they want the baby to die at home rather than in the hospital. And then that's what we do now. We no longer have an inpatient unit. Thanks to government cutbacks, we had to close our inpatient unit. So now we just do home care. And we'll do it. We'll take care of them in the home. So the child's 8 days old. I'll meet her tomorrow, the next day, which she'll be 9 days old. And I just opened myself up and, what can I do to help the baby? What can I do to help the parents? And I just kind of got an image, and it looked like seven little angels next to me. And I just keep an open mind, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, just show me what I can do to help this family. It looked like seven little angels. They look kind of like Christmas tree ornaments, like glass ornaments, like cherubs, like fat little angels. They didn't have wings. They weren't really fat. They just like fragile little glass globes of children, and just filled with love flowing down through them, and flowing through this lovely little family that I don't even know who they are yet. Just love flowing through them. And it was overflowing, and I was just getting blasted with this incredible universal feeling of love. And it was just wonderful. And that was all I got. It was just a feeling of love coming from these little beings towards this family. So the next day I start care on this family, and here's the little baby. And I met the wonderful mother. The father's having a medical crisis, so he wasn't there. The infant lived 3 more days and then died. And I'm staying there with the mother and the deceased infant. The father's coming home in a couple hours. I didn't want her to be there alone, so I stayed with her. And we were talking, and she says that they were anticipating that there was going to be a problem with this child. They were going through a, a fertility clinic, and they had years had problems conceiving the baby. But she says they're still hopeful for more because they had 7 frozen embryos still at the fertility clinic. And the day before I saw them, that was the vision that I saw. That was the blessing the universe shared with me, was to see, perhaps it was the spirits of those 7 little embryos. I mean, I don't know. I didn't say anything to her, but that was like the universe just giving me a little pat on the back here. This is a blessing for you for all that you've done. And it's like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you. You know, and if you ever want to know if there's such a thing as a magic word, it's thank you. Those are the most magic words you could ever say. Mm. That's why I say back to the universe, thank you for that blessing that God, the universe, whatever it is, shared with me. Yeah. And I'll share that with you.
No, really, thank you for sharing, David. I can just feel the
Yeah.
emotion. You can feel the power. I would love to be as thankful to the universe as you are. I should meditate more, try and help out more people, I guess. But let's move on. I'm getting emotional. Let's move on. So, what kind of sightings have you seen, related to actual UAPs and some of these beings? You mentioned some really interesting things that the children and adults were both seeing.
The children saw. And this is interesting that, especially what the children saw. And I worked in um, and again, I worked in mostly inpatient units for hospice. And it made it so nice because, we were in one facility and we had support, because it would be me. I was the RN. We would usually have an LPN and then a nursing assistant. And sometimes throughout the day, we would have social workers. A physician would visit once a day. I oftentimes worked nights. So we would have other support systems, especially when we'd have families there and they would support each other. But in this one particular facility, because we had so many children, we just opened up a pediatric inpatient facility. And this was about 1998. So it was a year after the Phoenix Lights. And the Phoenix Lights, I was working in Mesa at the time, and it flew right over my head by about 30 feet because I was on a hill and I saw the craft mostly horizontally. And I got a blast of, like, people would call a download of, like, the most incredible blast of, like, love, kinship, feeling, emotion, camaraderie, family from that craft, like I've never felt before in my life. And I wasn't into UFOs at all. I couldn't care less about UFOs when that thing went over my head. So, and that was 1997. Our inpatient unit in Mesa closed not long after that. And then I moved into another one that opened up just for the pediatrics. So it just I wonder if that had anything to do with what I'm about to tell you about this or not.
What was the description of the craft? What do you remember actually seeing?
People say that your memory changes over time, and again, I journal. So that night I wrote everything down, so my memory is exactly accurate because I have my original notes from that night, from March 13th 1997 down, so I know exactly what I saw. And I was driving home. I was a little late getting out of work because the night nurse was late getting into work, so it put me at the exact best place I could possibly be to have seen the Phoenix Lights craft that night. And I worked in East Mesa. It was right off Higley Road. I worked in a 10-bed adult inpatient hospice unit. Um, so I got off. I was supposed to get off around 7:30 at night. I probably got off about 8 or so, and I was heading down Route 60, heading from Mesa to Phoenix. And the freeway was under construction. It was under construction for like 10 years. Were you in Phoenix back then?
No, no, I was there in 2003. Is when I'm to
Okay.
2004. Yeah.
Okay. And so, anyway, every time you went under an overpass, you had to get off the overpass and go over it, and then get back on Route 60 and then go forward. And then the next overpass, you had to get off and go back over. It was all torn up for ages. And a lot of people didn't go over the freeway back then. They just went off the other roads. But it was a long trip going from East Mesa to Phoenix. So, I just endured it every time. I was in Tempe. I don't remember which exit I was on, but I got off the overpass, and there was like a hill of construction debris. And I probably was supposed to go around it, but I ended up, I think I was up on top of it. So I was nearly parallel with a freeway streetlight. And it was probably maybe just a couple feet higher than what I was in elevation. And I'm getting ready to go back down, and I look out the windshield of my truck. I'm seeing this massive boomerang in the sky coming towards me. So I'm heading west. I got the brights of my truck on. So I'm looking kind of northwest out of the windshield. And here it's coming. You can see me. It's low in the sky. It was very low, heading right towards me. And it was an obvious boomerang shape. And I know people describe it as a V. It was not a V. And at the bottom of it, the lights, it was dripping down. It looked like lava. And it was bright orange, like orange crush orange, glowing, dripping down with streaks of yellow from it. So I'm slamming on my brakes. I get out of my truck. I got my bright headlights on. Behind me on the right was the freeway streetlights, and they're taller than the neighborhood streetlights and brighter. So the craft is coming up towards me, and I'm thinking it looks so bright, and this stuff that looks like lava dripping down. I'm thinking it looks very, very hot. So I didn't know, should I get back in my truck? Should I get behind the truck? Am I going to burn? Because the nearest one coming towards me is getting darn close. So the tip of the left wing of the craft, the boomerang shaped craft, if the craft, when it gets over me, if the craft fell down, I could take like 2 steps and I could have kicked the tip of the left wing. And it was rounded. I don't know, the people that draw the V shaped craft make it look like a point, but it was rounded horizontally and it was rounded vertically. And I couldn't see up the sides, I could see just a bit, but it was like a gunmetal gray. And it was probably about um, 80% matte and maybe about 20% reflective. And the whole bottom of the craft, because I have the brightness of my uh, truck lights and then the street light, I could see maybe 50 to 100 feet very well lit at the bottom of the craft, and there was thousands of oval shaped indentations, maybe 6, 8 feet over, like the spoon, like the bowl of a spoon, in the bottom of the craft. Thousands of them, as far as I could see, and they cast shadows. The shadows from the light of the truck and from the street light in, and then from this orange dripping lava dripping down from the openings from the craft. The light came from this dripping lava, not from inside so much of the craft, dripped down and would form like big drops, and it would stop and then come back up, and more would drip down like a lava lamp upside down, going up and down. And when it would drip down, it would kind of stretch and turn yellow. So it was yellow and orange dripping down, up and down. And then that would cast like an orange shadow in the oval indentations. And it would just go like this, just went right over my head and passed on. And each one of the lights was dripping orange lava. And there was no heat, there was no odor. It didn't blow any wind. I didn't feel my hair move. It didn't singe my eyebrows. It nothing. There was no nothing, because I was kind of like feeling my face. Am I going to burn? My eyes didn't dry out. Um, there was no problem at all. There was no sound, nothing. And then right after it passed, there was like this wave of a colorful mist. It was colors of like rainbow colors, like a flag. And it looked like pretty. It looked like a flag you would see in Disneyland, flying right over my head. And then I just got a blast of like love. It was like, hey, we're just checking on you. We love you. We miss you. We're here. Uh, we're coming by to just make sure you're okay and let you know, we're touching in. We haven't forgotten you. Um, see ya. It was just like family. It was like family from 1,000 years saying, here we are. See you later. And I just started crying, and I stood there and cried for 10 minutes watching it out of sight. And it went down and it was low. Yeah, I could have hit it with a rock. And in fact, I thought, I wonder what it would sound like if I hit it with a rock. If I would, is it paper? Is it going to blow up? Zap me? I'm a guy. That's what we do. We throw rocks.
Male mentality.
That's my insight, hit it with a rock. But then I thought, there might be consequences. And I thought, it's not nice. I shouldn't do that. And I didn't. And I'm on this hill of construction dirt, and there's rocks everywhere. But I'm a hospice nurse. We don't throw rocks. But it was just kind of like, I wonder what it would sound like. It's not that I wanted to hurt it. I just was curious. And it just went out of sight. And it's interesting. I've only heard of one other person that saw the colorful mist, and he made a video of it. It's called the Prescott Witness, and I think he's gone now. And in his CGI that he did, it's exactly what I saw. And only two people now that of all the witnesses, and I'm one of them, and he's the other. Saw that.
Cutting into the interview here, after I recorded, David sent me the YouTube link to the Prescott Witness, and it is a really interesting audio testimony. If you're listening on audio, and there is a CGI as well on video, so I'll just play that short clip now.
There's no doubt in my mind at all that that was a spaceship that flew over my house.
What follows is a forensic animation of the details of the witness report based on the timing of key events.
I was sitting there watching TV, and for some reason, I glanced up, and I saw what I thought were stars behind Granite Mountain that were in a line. And I thought to myself, gosh, what constellation is that? And it just sort of went out of my head. I started watching TV. I don't know how much time passed, maybe 2 minutes, something like that. And I looked up again, and they were much bigger and much closer. And then I realized that these aren't stars. This is something that I need to walk out on the back porch and look at. I saw that they obviously weren't stars. And they were, at that point, I would say they had just come over the top of Granite Mountain. Walked through the laundry room, walked out on the back porch, and looked up, and they just kept getting brighter and closer. They looked just like lights. I couldn't figure out what it was. They were different lights than any lights that I'd ever seen. And then they just continued to get brighter and bigger and closer. I didn't even really know that they were lights. They were a light source. There was something about them that they weren't really like headlights on a car or landing lights on a jet plane at the airport or something. Like I've sat down there on 48th Street when I was a kid and watched the jets come into Sky Harbor, and the landing lights are on, and you're sitting there watching them. And those lights, they're real bright white. These lights were a little bit more yellow. It's like a yellow cast, but they had a depth to them, like they really had strength. I saw the curvature of the front of the ship, and I could see the light like in its well. The tree obscured it for half a second, and then I saw it real clearly straight overhead off to my right. Right as the ship was going over, the light passed off to my right. That's when I saw the bottom, the belly of the whole ship. There was like a light grid. It was almost dancing to a beat, dim light, almost shadows behind. I wouldn't say that it was intense, but it was definitely profound. To my perception, I thought it looked like it was cloaked in some way so that I couldn't see what was behind it. It was almost like a holographic projection, maybe a few feet away from the bottom of the ship, that was in that light pattern, so that couldn't really look past that. After the light grid went over, that's when I got my first good look at the exhaust plumes on the back porch. That's when I really saw them the best from the side, where I really could see all the colors of the rainbow, shaped kind of like a flag or a pendant coming out the back of the craft. They were just really cool looking. They had impulses of light within the plumes that were individual impulses of light. There was like a fifth scale effect, all going back with the exhaust. And it also was weaving behind there like a snake. It was like a 3D, all happening at once. Then when I walked through the house, went out on the front porch, got another really good look at the exhaust plume. And then I could look up and I could see how many stars just completely gone from the sky. And I realized that this thing was just about the size of downtown Prescott. I'm about a mile from downtown Prescott. Just covered up everything. Once I realized how large it was, it just faded off into the night just quite quickly. I wanted it to last longer. I wanted to see more of it. It just went away.
That CGI was also covered on ABC 15 at News. So it is a popular event in Phoenix, and they've showed this on News Station. Again, thanks to David for sending that over. And check out his YouTube channel, actually. Link is in the description.
And what was that? And it was when that mist went over my head that I had this incredible feeling of love. And just like, generally when I talk about it, I cry. And I've been on a couple TV shows and I cry. And people, make fun of me about it. And who was that? Jake, what's his name?
Oh, Jake Barber.
Yes. And he cried on the show. And it's like, I get it, Jake. I get exactly what you're talking about. I got touched by it. I got touched by the craft. And that's the only craft I've ever seen. And it was like family. That's the feeling I got. But I'm a feely kind of guy. I'm a hospice nurse, and I've learned to use my feelings in how I communicate with people in the universe. So I don't know. It was a wonderful experience. And you know what? The videos of the craft, because it, okay, so this was probably about 8:30, 8:40 in the evening. It was very low. It went then down, and I watched it completely out of sight. It kind of went down I-10. I watched it go over Chandler, very low. I mean, it was just over streetlights. And it did seem to get less wide. So I wonder if other people said that they saw it go from a boomerang to a V. So some other people that saw it farther north said it moved in shape. So I wonder if it did change shape, but it did not go over a South Mountain. And when you see videos, it's over South Mountain. It did not go over South Mountain. It went totally east of South Mountain and went completely south of South Mountain down I-10. So the videos are mostly around 10 o'clock, and that was a separate sighting. And by 10 o'clock, I was home in farther north in Phoenix, and I saw the 10 o'clock sighting, but it was hard for me to see because there was trees and buildings in the way. And that looked totally different than the craft I saw at around 8:38, 8:40 when I was in Tempe. That was a completely separate sighting. Those look different. But then I wasn't close. I wasn't underneath that.
And it sounded like that changed your whole viewpoint after that. You were more, I guess, open minded.
Well, yeah, I mean, I never thought much of UFOs prior to that. If there was a special on TV, I'd probably watch it, but I didn't go out of my way. Um, I believe my father had seen one. I mean, he used to talk about him, but he was in the Air Force in the 40s and 50s. And he would talk about Wright Patterson Air Force Base and things that he had seen there back then. But he wouldn't talk to my brother and I when we were kids. But we would hear him talking about them with my mom in private. And then his dad saw one and had a newspaper clipping of a UFO he saw in 1919. It was a cigar-shaped craft flying over houses and trees, and then it zipped off. And he had kept that newspaper clipping in his scrapbook. So I would be the third generation in the family that saw one. And my sons died young. Who knows what they might have seen? I don't know. But it's interesting. I don't know. It just kind of came to me. Um, did that open up something with the hospice children that about a year later, when I was taking care of, I don't know if it has any relation at all, but the inpatient unit where I worked, we would get infants to age 17-year-old. We specified in those ages just because we could give special care, and that the families would maybe feel a little more comfortable, uh, being with you other families with children those age rather than with 70, 80, 90-year olds in the same facility. So many of our children, not all of our children were medicated heavily, and not all of our children were non responsive. We would get some children that were very lucid and didn't need a lot of medication. And many of our children that were 8, 9, 10, 12-year old, mostly those ages that were lucid and were not heavily medicated, would see the same thing over and over and over again and would talk about it. And it was beings that they would see in and describe them the same, and it would be kind of like what we would describe as a gray, except they had very thin heads, pinheads, but they would be about 4 feet tall, very thin heads, very big eyes, just a slit for a nose, a slit for a mouth, um, long hands, when they would describe him, it'd be like 3 or 4 fingers, never with 5 fingers. Very, very thin and skinny bodies. And they would describe them always the same way. And we had 7 rooms for 10 children. We had one room that had 3 beds in it, and there was solid walls between the 3 beds. The solid walls went from the ceiling to the floor, but the at the end of the room it was open, and this is generally where we would put some of our sickest kids. And that way the nurse could be at the end of the room and we could see all 3 of the children at the same time. And it was kind of nice because, we could just watch them and just kind of stand there. But sometimes we didn't have extremely sick children. So we had the lucid kids. And in that room, we would have the children seeing the same beings at the same time and responding to them. I never once saw the beings, ever, but the kids did. And they would be looking at the same place at the same time and like nodding to them or repeating what they would say. And they would repeat the same sounds at the same time, looking at the same spot. And we would have TVs, but rarely were the TVs on. It was mostly quiet time there. And the sounds that they would say, it would be like single syllables. And and I never heard what the beings were saying, but I heard what the children were repeating. And it would be like do, bat, da, pi, mo, pa, bo. And it's not a quote, but that's kind of what it would sound like. And sometimes the children would just watch them. Sometimes they'd giggle. Sometimes they'd smile. And sometimes they were absolutely terrified of them. And they couldn't wait to get away from her, where they would hide under the covers or try to get away, try to hide from. Some kids look forward to seeing them, and some just kind of casually looked at them and look away and would look back. And some were more mesmerized by them. But I don't know what the connection was. At the time, I just assumed that they were like skinny spirits there to support children. And I didn't know what a gray was. I wasn't into UFOs. I never heard of a gray. Um, so I wished I knew more about that. I didn't attend like a lot of seminars. I mostly worked weekends because I like to go camping. So I would work weekends almost exclusively, so I could go camping during the week. But because of that, I didn't get to go to a lot of like, you know, seminars or things for spiritual events, or, maybe I would have attended maybe some UFO events and could have had some more insight into NHI or something. But, that probably, maybe I should have taken some time off and researched this. They drew them, some of the kids did, and I don't know if maybe in some boxes I may still have some of the drawings, but they drew them the same. They described them the same. This went on for 5 years that we were open. And then in our other rooms, they were private rooms. The children there that were lucid, that weren't heavily medicated, were having the same experiences. It was the same beings. And, our kids were not, I don't think any of our kids were walking. And it wasn't like the kids were getting together and talking and playing. These are end of life children. I think very few of our children lived more than 2 weeks. Now and then we would get respite children where they would come in and we would give their parents a break, and the kids would come in and we would take care of them so the parents could, do something, have some quiet time. But most of our kids that would come in, it was end of life. So it's not like the children could interact and share stories and play. These are not healthy children. They were mostly 100% care children. So I don't know what they were. So were they ETs? I don't know. I'm not saying they were ETs, but they certainly described them like thin-headed grays. And it was the pale skin, the thin-headed grays. You tell me, what do you think they were?
Did you see it only at that actual site during those 5 years?
And again, I never saw them. And I would send out my vibration to them. I would say, please let me see you. I mean, I would like to have seen them or felt them or something. They never did appear to me. And it was only at that one facility. And now I do home care. And I am not hearing that, but I do mostly infants because the other nurses don't want to care for infants. So there's not a whole lot of communication with those. And I've not heard that. So I wonder, was it the location's now gone, the building's now gone, everything's gone. Was it the location? Was there something in that area? Was it something? Now I'm looking back. Was it something from the Phoenix Lights that I was zapped with? Was it? I don't know. Were they spirits? Was it spirits that look odd? But I've never heard anybody else describe something like that. Um, I don't know. I
Have
have
you heard
no
it from
idea.
any other hospice nurses?
Some of the other nurses heard the children talk about it, but we had to watch what we said to the parents. And I had to watch how I questioned the children because I didn't want to alarm the parents. I mean, the parents are the absolutely worst times of their life already. And I don't want to alarm them anymore. Like, oh my God, now what's happening? Are they seeing demons or something? I don't want, we're walking on eggshells. Not, I mean, our goal is the, to have the least worst outcome possible. I mean, that's our goal, especially in pediatric hospice, is to, you know, I mean, there's no good outcome in pediatric hospice. I don't want to make anything worse for the parents and panic them that the children are seeing something that they shouldn't see. So, you know, if I did ask the children something, generally when the nurse would come into the room, that's when mom or dad would go take a break. That's when they go run to the restroom, go have a smoke, go get a bite to eat. So it's okay to leave the child. And then sometimes, we could talk a little bit about it. I don't know. We had our hands full. When I went into the room, and I'm slightly interested in what they're seeing, but generally I have a big mess to take care of. They're bleeding, they're draining, they're in pain. I got my hands full taking care of the child. And, this is just kind of something on the side that I'm kind of interested in. Boy, I wished I had asked more questions. I wished I'd put more attention on it. I wished I wished I did ask more questions at the time.
I thought it was interesting when you said that they were in separate areas where they couldn't see each other, but they were still from different rooms looking in the same general direction.
Yeah, yeah. It was the same room, but they're completely separated off by solid walls, so they couldn't see each other or hear each other, but they're looking in the same area where the being was. And I'm thinking, what a spirit, what a wonderful spiritual thing this is. Wow, what a validation of a spiritual blessing. I'm getting a kick out of this. And maybe it is. I'm thinking it is. I'm still going with that this was a wonderful event for these children. Now, I'm hearing people's interpretation of what grays and beings are doing, and I don't know if these people know what they're talking about. I don't want to talk down on people's interpretation of what the space beings are. Do they know? I don't know. and that's my thing. If I don't absolutely know something, I'm just going to, I tell the truth. I don't know. You know, yeah, I don't know what their agenda is. I didn't feel anything malevolent. And again, I'm a feely person. Am I right? Am I wrong? Who knows? Something was going on. Some being was there. I totally believe that. I totally believe the children saw something because they described it the same. And this was over 5 years. And they were seeing it at the same time and they were repeating the sounds at the same time. And children in separate rooms were seeing the same thing. Something was going on. And this was going on when I wasn't there with the other nurses, you know. So, and it was interesting. Some of the other nurses, we had hospice also draws a lot of interesting nurses. We get a lot of radical traditional nurses. And I don't want to, pinpoint certain religions, but when the children would draw them, the nurses would take some of the drawings and put halos on them, and then they would add wings and a beard and say, "Oh, they're drawing Jesus. Oh, they're drawing Mary," and put a crown of thorn on them. The children did not see, and the children did not draw. You could see the ink was different, and that the wings were in a different hand, and and they were trying to use that to validate their religion, and that muddied the water a lot. That uh, that a lot of our traditional religious nurses were trying to validate. So, and they say, "Oh yeah, David said they saw angels." No, they never used the word angel once, and I don't want to, I don't want to knock religion, but never once did they say that. You know, so I don't know. You tell me. I have no answers. No answers at all. I don't know what they.
Uh, on the show, and thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Is I'd had another audience member, so another longtime subscriber, who was also a hospice nurse, and they mentioned that in many instances, they said over 80%, they believed at the end of life, and this was with adults, they were talking to someone in the room. Basically, that they would turn and talk to someone that they knew, a familiar presence. So I thought when you contacted me, I was very happy to have you on the show. Have you dealt with that as well?
Oh, a lot of time. And you'll hear the patient's side of a conversation. They'll have a whole long conversation. And that's going on. I had I had something I had a near death experience as a child and which was really interesting because I got a validation from it. I don't know if you have time. I don't want to take up too much time on that
Yeah, no,
because it was.
please.
And I had I was in and out of the hospital for 3 years as a child with a very serious lung disease. And something happened, um, a medical emergency, and the nurses and doctors were all working on me. And I just remember all at once feeling wonderful. And I got out of my bed and I walked right through all the nurses and I walked out of my hospital room and walked into the hallway of the Children's Hospital. This would have been probably about 1959, 1960, something about like that. I'm walking into the hallway of the hospital, and it was an old hospital, big hallways and wide hallways. And there's this ball of people, looked like people with no bones. They look like ghosts. How you draw a ghost, kind of um, a misty white outline, but a solid form, like a pen and ink drawing. And they were just swirling around tight like a ball of snakes. Lived on a farm, and sometimes we'd see snakes in a ball just writhing around. And there must have been a couple hundred of them, just swirling and stretching, and their arms and legs going in and out of this massive ball. And people, physical people, are just walking through the hallways, walking right through it. They didn't see it, but me out of the body, in spirit form, I could see this ball of like souls stretching and writhing. They looked miserable, but I didn't feel misery from them. Just in and out, swirling and swirling. And I'm fascinated by it, and standing there and watching it. And this little girl comes up to me and says, "You want to go play?" I go, "Well, sure, that would be great. Let's go play." So we go outside, and I knew the hospital very well because I've been there so many times, and there's no playground out there. But in this out of the body experience I'm having, there was a playground. So we go out there and we play for a while. And she tells me her name's Penny. She's in this little checkered pinafore. She has a chipped tooth. She's got real thick hair and it's braided going down her back. And she's got these little black shoes with a little strap over them. And we're bouncing a ball and we're on a teeter totter and we're on this thing called a maypole. I'd never seen one before. But later, when I described it to my mom, she told me what it was. And we're playing and having a good time. And she says, "Well, you can play a little bit longer, but you can't stay here." And so we play. And then she says, "You got to go back. Tell my mom I love her." And I said, "Well, why don't you tell her?" And she says, "No, you tell her." And I instinctively knew who her mom was. It was one of the nurses that is taking care of me. So after a while, I'm going back and I'm back in my body and I'm back in the bed and all the nurses are kind of walking away. I'm just thinking, well, feeling a little bit better. And that night, when the night shift comes in comes this nurse. And I knew that this was Penny's, the little girl's mom. And she starts taking care of me. And I said, "I played with your daughter Penny today." And I described her and I described the dress that she was wearing and her shoes and her hair and the chip in her tooth. And she said, for me to tell you that she loved you. And she flipped out. She looked at me like I just grew horns. And she backed up and she walked out of the room and she never came back. And later, my mom told me that she quit. She quit on the job. She quit right then and there. She flipped out so much. Her daughter had drowned in a skating accident, and she was they were Catholic, and the little pinafore was her Catholic uniform that she wore in school. And she had a very thick hair and wore it in a braid, and she had a chipped tooth, and her name was Penny, and I had given and my near death experience. I mean, all these people have all these wonderful, insights into the universe, but my near death experience was to give the final message for this little girl to her mother. And for whatever reason, of course, she flipped out at the time. Maybe down the road, it gave her peace that her daughter's okay and happy. And I hope so. And that was my near death experience, serving others. And I think, and I'm 71 years old and I'm still serving others. The interesting thing is that ball of people that I saw out of the body. Now, as a nurse at work, 6 more times, I have seen that exact same thing, but in the body, at work, wide awake, with my eyes wide open in a hospital setting. I have seen it. In the AIDS setting, where in the AIDS inpatient setting, I've seen it at work in the hallway. I don't know if it's the same beings, and it's in and whatever the hallway was, it took up the same hallway. I saw it in a hospital that also had a huge hallway, and it was just massive, and they just writhe. And then I saw it in a hospice setting in a break room. And people, again, just the visitors and people walking right there, they don't see it. I see it clear as day. 6 more times. I have no idea what it is. But someone just contacted me and told me in Robert Monroe wrote a book on out of the body travel, and that he did a drawing of that very same thing. And I've got to find it now. Exactly. So, uh, what was it? I don't know. But I've seen it 7 times in my life, once in a near death experience, and 6 times at work. So, what was that? I don't, I don't know. And another thing I've seen, and this is an adult hospice, and I call them refrigerator people, because that's exactly what they look like. And they're beings just before people die, I'll see them. And this is physically, I see them. And I've had a couple other nurses that I've talked to, again, on nursing chat rooms, and they've described them too. They're big and bulky. They look about 6, 7 feet tall, big shoulders, and their bodies look like refrigerators almost. Big, squared off shoulders, no neck, an oval shaped head. And I can see right through them. It looks like light coming down from the ceiling, from the sky, kind of shining down on them. And they'll kind of like be, 10 feet away or surrounding the room. And as the patient dies, more and more show up, and they get closer and closer to the bed. And finally, I have to start like walking through them. And I say, like, excuse me, excuse me. And I feel uncomfortable having to walk through them. And as the patient gets sicker and sicker, more and more common, they totally surround the bed. And when the patient dies, they just disappear. And I've seen that several hundred times, but only with adults, and usually younger adults, usually in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Um, I saw many around AIDS patients. I don't know why that was. And never around children. And I don't know what they are. And I drew several images of them, and people compared them to cave drawings. And it was like, this is exactly what was in petroglyphs they were drawing into. So what were they? I don't know. But I touch in with spirit, so I don't know who they were. But other nurses have seen those. I'm sure they're called something other than refrigerator people, but that's what I call them.
Well,
I don't know.
amazing stories, David. And you mentioned one other where you had 36 people had the same account on a Reddit page. Can you just describe that for the last
Yeah,
story?
sure. Um, I was raised in Southern Ohio on a farm, and we had no indoor plumbing. And we were out in the middle of nowhere, no shoes, no plumbing, chickens in the yard. And of course, that's where I got my lung infection. And out in the middle of nowhere, dirt road. And one day, it was early in the morning, and I'm on the porch, and the chickens are out there, and all at once they're running, freaking out. And chickens aren't chicken. You get a snake in the yard, and the chickens will run up and peck it to death and eat it. And roosters will protect you. But these things ran. They ran under the porch, they ran in the cornfield, ran across the road. I'm thinking, something big's coming in the yard. So I'm looking around the porch, and here comes, it's a stuffed toy bunny. And it was like a little white tummy and a little blue back, and uh, like pink inside ears, a stuffed bunny. And it was like soiled and kind of goofy. It was kind of like a dirty toy bunny, kind of wobbled off to one side. And it was floating in the air like about 2 feet off the ground. And it was kind of wobbling. Can you see this? I can't see. Like somebody's holding it from behind, saying, "Oh, here comes the bunny." Here, like someone's playing with a kid or playing with a puppy, but there's nobody behind it. It's floating in the air by itself. And I'm wide awake. And even though I'm a kid, it's like, this is crazy. Bunnies don't, toy bunnies don't go floating in the air. And I'm hearing a voice, and I don't know if it's with my ears or if it's in my mind. And it's saying, "Come on, I need some help. If you'll come with me and help me, afterwards we can go have fun. We'll have some adventures. We can play together. We'll be buddies." I'm a little kid out in the middle of nowhere with, a 70-year-old grandmother. You get lonesome. My pals were chickens. So, normally you would want somebody to play with, and have a talking toy buddy. That would be a blast. We had a TV. We got one channel back then, reception. So you would think, that would be quite enticing, but it scared the chickens. The chickens saw it first, and that alarmed me. I'm a farm boy. You pay attention to stuff like that. And I kept saying, "No, I'm not going with you." And he said, come on, we'll have fun. Come with me, let's go." And it's kind of wibbling around. It's like, "No, I'm not going with you." And finally, it stops and it starts backing up and going around the side of the house. And it gets out of sight and I can't see it. So I grab onto the corner of the house and I swing around to see where it's going. And it had turned around and was walking around the back of the house. And when it turned around, it looked like about a 2.5 foot dinosaur with like spikes on its back and a tail dragging on the ground. Four legs, like a regular dinosaur. And I couldn't see the head, but it looked like the snout was stuck in the back of like a toy bunny, the back of a toy bunny. And it ran around the side of the house. I'm thinking, what the heck is this? So I run in the house and I tell my grandmother, and she grabs a gun and she's tearing off around the side of the house after it. She goes, "You get in the house and stay in there." And I'm looking out the windows and I don't know where she's going. I think, should I go chase her and save her? I didn't know what it was, what to do. And pretty soon she comes back and she's very upset. And she's looking out the windows. I'm looking out the windows. And she says, "Whatever you do, if anything, man or beast, tries to get you to go with it, don't go with it." And she was very upset. And we both stayed in the house for like a couple days. And it took quite a while before the chickens came back into the yard. They were very, very startled. And, you know, I don't know. I sat on this for 60 some years because, I mean, what was it? What a crazy thing to have had happen. It wasn't spirit. It wasn't anything. I wondered about this for years, and I finally went to my very first UFO event in 2022. Never went to one before at all. I finally retired, had some weekends off. There was a UFO event, so I went to it. And they had a session called the Experiencers Session. And I was going to tell my Phoenix Light story. And I wasn't going to tell this story because what a crazy thing to have had happen. And the first guy that stood up told my story. And interesting, he was from Ohio too. And his experience happened like 20 years after mine. And it was an Easter bunny, except his was animated. His wasn't a toy. But he grew up with television and getting to see cartoons. I never got to see cartoons. And it was a cartoon Easter bunny came up to him and tried to get him to go away with it. And he wouldn't do it. And it kept on and kept on trying to get him to go with it. And nope, I'm not going to do it. And finally it went away. And then the next guy that stood up, he said, "Wait, the same thing happened to me." And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is crazy. And he had an Easter bunny do the same thing to him and tried to get him to go with it. And his was also animated. And he wouldn't go with it. Well, and I'm thinking, I'm much older than they were, and I'm out in the country. I didn't get to watch cartoons, so an animated bunny wouldn't have meant anything to me. But a poor kid out on a dirt road in the country, I mean, people used to drive by and they would leave like sacks of clothes, sacks of food, sacks of old toys. And they would stop and leave it on the side of the road and drive off. And so that's all I ever had to play with was old, dirty toys. And like this Easter bunny, it had a bow around its neck, and the bow was all like old and torn and dirty. And that's what a poor kid on a farm would find normal. If it was fancy and pretty and clean and animated, that would be unusual for me. It appeared in what I would have found normal and would have gone with. So this was 1922 or 19, I can't, so 2022. So finally, I pushed my way in because the next person was going to speak in the experience center, and I wouldn't let him. I just pushed my way in. I said, the same thing happened to me. And I got to share my story. And we all got together afterwards and talked about it and shared phone numbers. So I got on Reddit and I made a post, and I'll send you the link to all the comments I got. And 36 other, I got over 400 comments. 36 people replied with the exact same thing, but depending on their age, it whatever it was took on the form of what would have been their childhood hero. One, it was Woody from Toy Story. Several, it was the Ninja um, Turtles, Mutant Turtles. One, it was Captain Crunch. Um, and of the 36, only one went with it. And it was a woman, and she was a little girl at the time, and it was Santa. And she didn't read all of my post to hear what had happened to me. She went with it, and this is sad. And we still communicate. It was Santa, and when she got on the sleigh, there was a hatch in the back of the sleigh. She couldn't hop in the sleigh like Santa and the elves. The hatch unscrewed, and she had to crawl in to the hatch on the sleigh, and he took her to the North Pole, and she would be strapped down and had absolutely horrible um, medical examinations, and they have continued now for like 30 years, and it still happens, I guess, now and then over the years. But one time when she was a little girl and she was getting into the sleigh, and Santa turned around, his Santa outfit split open in the back, and he had turned around. Out came a dinosaur tail with spikes on it that was dragging down exactly the way I saw it. Isn't that interesting? And she hadn't heard my story. So that's interesting. Something's going on. And someone sent me a clip, and I'll send you the clip. It's on YouTube from Steven Spielberg's. Um, it's a mini series that was on TV called Taken from 2002. And there's a clip of this little squirrel, animated squirrel, that comes to pick up this little boy out of his room. And he comes, oh, come on. And the boy climbs out of his window, and the little squirrel's giggling, and they go into a hollow tree, like they're going to go play and have a great adventure. And once the boy enters the hollow of the tree turns into a spaceship, and off they go into space. And I was like, uh-huh. Something is going on. Something is happening all over, and something is taking on the form uh, of, of, of a character that a child would trust to lure children away. And for whatever reason, I don't know. And it appeared to me, and I sat on this for over 60 years, and I had nowhere to go with it. I had no one to talk to about it. I had I had no idea where to take this all these years. And thank God I finally, I went to an experiencers session, and thank God somebody had the nerve to speak up, or I would still be sitting on this to this day. So people like you that are allowing people like me that have that are willing to share these stories, as crazy as it sounds, and I'm sure there's going to be comments, people saying I'm crazy. Who cares if one person out there is listening? that is listening to this, that maybe had this happen to them and has been tormented through your life, having an experience of seeing a ball of people, or or having a hospice experience or something, and doesn't know where to go to, and thinking that you're nuts. To know that somebody else is having this experience too, that we need a resource where people can go and get information on this and be able to share it and not feel that you're being criticized. So I'm glad. Thank you for having me on this. If nothing else, to let other people know you're not alone. Oh, so you tell me, what do you think it is? You're the expert.
I'm the expert. Yeah, I think that's why I'm so interested in near death experiences. Actually, I listen to a near death experience almost every night before bed. Um, I look into telepathy. I think that's definitely related. The telepathy tapes. The season 2, they have a whole episode on people being able to communicate, mediums, like your story, essentially, of someone passing messages, if it's just to loved ones they're currently alive, letting them know that they're okay. And then the UAP phenomenon, I think it's all interrelated. I think we really don't understand nearly anything about the nature of reality. I think we're just now starting to see behind the curtain. And I think it's through this shared information space that we have now. We have decentralized information. You went to an experiencer group, and that's what really changed your mind on this, at least about speaking out about it. So
Yeah.
the more podcasts that happen, someone will see this ultimately. And I learned, honestly, I learned a ton from the comments. Reading through the comments, and yeah, there are gonna be bad comments. No matter what. If you say anything controversial, if you say anything that really takes courage to come out and say, you will get negative comments. And the wider a video, gets coverage, the more views it has, the more negative comments that we'll get. And I remove offensive comments. So if anyone's going to write an offensive comment, just know I'm going to be remove it or hide you from the channel. You can also get shadow banned if you haven't noticed people replying to your comments. But what you'll find is, a lot of people will have those experiences and will share in the comments. And so I'm curious to hear, if someone has had those experiences, please, write in the comments, and I'll let David know if he hasn't seen them. And like I already said, I met you, got you on the show through one of the comments, and already mentioned another subscriber who is a hospice nurse. So thank you so much, David. That was unbelievable. Thank you so much for all you do for humanity, really. And yeah, it's touching, that how much you care. And so I think that we need more of that in the world, and I think it's important. And so thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your warmth and your caring with me and everyone else. So thanks again, man.
Great. Thank you for having me on.
Wow, what a interview. I've had some amazingly memorable interviews on this channel, and this was surely one of them. I'm never going to forget that. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Just the amazing number of experiences. And it does seem like if you've had one of these experiences, you tend to have more. So I think maybe some people can just see, like, some people have better vision, some people have better hearing. It seems like some people do have more of a sixth sense, or they can see things that other people can't. Finally, I wanted to play the clip from Taken about the squirrel, and that clip is just, oh man, it's super creepy. I never saw that series, but I want to play it at the end, and I think it may be copyright striked, so I might have to remove it later. So if it's not there, you'll know why, but I want to leave you with that. Thanks for watching and listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. It does help all the watch time. And if you want to support further, it also really is the backbone of the channel is my Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/Chris Lehto. All right, here's the clip.
When you're a kid, all you ever want is for the stories your mom reads you to be true. You think you can crawl inside the world that's in every book and live in the pictures on every page. But deep down you know that this isn't something that could ever happen. And it's knowing that the magic isn't quite there. That it's just over the next hill. Or maybe in the next story that makes you feel safe in your bed at night. You really wouldn't want it to be any other way.